Hi, everybody. Dr. Meri Crowley. I've got an incredible program today. Many of you that are watching have children, and many of you are married. And what you're going to hear on this program is where one man has literally had his children taken away from him for wanting to pray. And this was by the family courts. You are going to want to listen to this because it could happen to any of you. But before we talk with Tony Pellegrino and Benjamin Thomas, let's roll the commercial of QE Strong Allergy.
The quantum effect wipes out pain and allergy symptoms in less than 30 seconds with zero drugs. Pastor Dave and hundreds of others have experienced the quantum effect for themselves. It's backed by scientific research and rigorous lab testing. Quantum is simply about two things. One, intentions. As a man thinketh, so he is. And two, renewing your mind with the Word of God. Only QE Strong encodes key intentions and Bible verses about healing onto the small patch. You simply place it on your body each day, and with a bonus prayer guide, read out loud a positive intention and one or two Bible verses about healing each day. The patch provides the touch, and the prayer guide uses your sight, speech, and hearing to relieve pain and allergy symptoms with the senses God gave you. It even works for people who have suffered decades of chronic symptoms. Are you ready to experience the quantum effect? Go to qestrong.com/Meri.
Yeah, so if you go to qestrong.com, put my promo code Meri, Meri, you'll get a significant discount. They not only have patches for allergies, they also have it for pain, for losing weight, the keto patch. They also have for anxiety, for sleeplessness. They've got many patches and they really work. So go to qestrong.com, put in my promo code Meri, and it will really be a blessing to you. So anyway, you guys, good to see you guys. Tony Pellegrino, I've had you on my program before, the American Common Law Academy, and Benjamin Thomas is a best-selling author and a businessman who now is literally in the family courts in Washington, D.C. as one that's having to defend, his own being a father to even seeing his children. So good to have you on the show today, guys. How are you?
Great to be here, Meri.
To have us.
Yeah, so now you recently were in Washington, D.C. just like a week or two ago, and you were in the court situation. Why don't we roll? In fact, I think this tells it pretty well. There is a 3-minute trailer. Why don't you set this up, Benjamin, about what this trailer is they're going to see?
Well, Tony and I have partnered together to fight against the family court system of injustice in America. And so what this trailer is a description of a new campaign that we've started together called Save the Family. And Tony is the American Common Law Academy. Tony, I'm his student, and we are literally in the trenches in Washington, D.C., fighting back at the federal court level of the injustice that happens every day in America in the family court system.
Wow. Well, and this could happen to any of you that are listening right now. If you don't think it could, you'll be amazed when you hear this story. Go ahead. Let's run that trailer, please.
Home should be sacred, but every day it's invaded without warning, without rights.
Two weeks later, the District of Columbia policeman came to my house and said, "You have to leave." Under duress, I had to leave my home that I'd paid for, and I wasn't even able to say goodbye to my sons.
They ripped me from my family based on lies. Now we're fighting to end this nightmare for everyone.
Status and jurisdiction. Who are you and how does the law apply to you? This seems to be the confusion that the courts are using to basically bamboozle you into thinking that you don't have any rights in a courtroom. You are one of we the people. You are under the supreme law of the land. We need to start going on offense. Playing defense in family court is futile, and your attorney is going to defer to the court in his obligation as an officer of the court. We need to understand these things for ourselves and assert our rights.
Parents united for our children. Justice for our kids. We won't back down.
Right now, there's a groundswell in America. People have had enough. People have had enough of the system that they know is wrong instinctively, but they don't know how to fight. Because when they go into the family courthouse, they just want to see their kids. And so they go in and grovel to the judges. They go in and kiss the ring with the hope that maybe if they play by the rules, they'll get to see their kids again. Well, you know what? Now's the time to fight. It's time to fight the system. And if everybody in America decided, we know what, we've had enough of this, we're gonna fight, and we're gonna remind these judges of their constitutional duty. And Americans start asking, have you taken an oath to the Constitution? Have you taken an oath to uphold the Bill of Rights? If enough Americans band together and we begin to fight these unjust practices, and we begin to fight these family courthouses, we can make a huge difference.
Tony Pellegrino and Benjamin Thomas take on the corrupt family courts in federal battle.
And so it's really, what's amazing to me is that they would have the audacity to try to say, you need a mental exam because you prayed for your child.
Be part of the movement. Don't be a victim. Be a history maker. Save the family.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know, those of you watching right now, my audience, I want you to know that you think, oh, this is just some isolated case. No, when Bill Clinton, when he was president, he signed the Adoption and Safe Families Act. Literally, the CPS system, and some people call it the child predator or pedophile system, they've literally weaponized that system against the families. And so you're going to hear Tony. Tony, I want to share, how did you get to meet Benjamin? In fact, you mentioned about Sheila Holm. We're doing an event coming up. We'll just briefly mention at the end, we'll talk about, but Sheila Holm is going to be at my 8th Open the Heavens in Las Vegas on May 8th and 9th. Sheila will be there, as well as Tony and Benjamin will be there. Let's put that up really quickly, the flyer. You're going to want to register. You know, if I don't sometimes put it up at the beginning, people don't always wait till the end. But it's going to be my May 8th Open the Heavens, Las Vegas, at the Ahern Hotel, which Don Ahern is a very successful businessman who's very good friends with President Trump, and they've done many Patriot events at, you know, this venue. And it's a boutique hotel. There is no gambling there, but they do have an incredible venue. In fact, we got 107, we've got Sheila Holm and Scott McKay, Patriot Street Fighter, who I know you guys were on his show just a week or so ago. We've got Kathy O'Brien, who's fought for the children. She was actually trafficked by her own father under the MK Ultra program, Operation Paperclip, in the 60s, late 50s and 60s. You know, we've got so many people that are going to be there. Tony Pellegrino and Dr. Scott Young and Louis Herm, so many freedom fighters and incredible people. So you're going to want to register for free or get your VIP tickets. We're only having 150 VIP spots because that's all it's going to take for the luncheon. So go to MeriCarley.com and register. You can actually meet Tony and Benjamin in person. So anyway, so let's take that off. Let's go into your story. Tony, how did you end up meeting Benjamin?
I had met Sheila, I think it was either at Chicago or in the Florida event at Open the Heavens. And and I was sharing about the remonstrance I did against the transgender affirmation in California and got that struck down. And then still in the process, it's been going on for a year, of trying to impeach a federal judge. And Sheila began to tell me about how she actually, I believe she got 3 judges thrown in jail from what was going on with her situation. And I believe she was doing the same thing as Benjamin Pro se, represent yourself. And so Sheila ended up connecting us two because she realized Benjamin's unique situation and also what I do. So it was a perfect connection.
Well, and Tony has spoke at, 3 or 4 of my Open the Heavens, very knowledgeable about what's going on. And a lot of these attorneys, they're under the Bar Association. Explain why that isn't necessarily good.
Yeah, bar members in American jurisprudence, it even states it in there. So this isn't a conspiracy theory, that the first duty of the attorney is to the court first, then the client second. And so therefore, they're officers of the court. They earn their living before that court. They often go before the same judges all the time. And so there's a conflict of interest that they don't want to ruffle the feathers or shake up the courtroom or press the judges about constitutional rights. And so most attorneys aren't even trained in detail in protecting the parental rights concerning the constitutional protected due process rights that they violate almost in every family court case. It's unbelievable.
Well, and so Benjamin, I've had you on my program. You've been a successful businessman and entrepreneur. You've also a very successful author. You've written several books. And then let's go into your story. What happened?
Well, Meri, in January of 2025, I was taking a nap in my home in DC, and I was awakened by 2 men in my home. And as I got up, I realized it was 2 Metropolitan Police Department cops in my home, let in by my ex-wife. And they said, you need to leave now. And I said, excuse me, do you have a warrant? They said, no. I said, do you have, what are the charges? And they said, we can't tell you. And I said, well, I'm going to have to call my attorney. And they said, it doesn't work like that. And I said, I'm not leaving unless you produce something. I'm sorry, this is my home. I paid for it in cash. I'm not leaving. And they produced an order from a judge in the District of Columbia, John McCabe Jr. And basically they said, how much time do you need to get out? And they gave me 1 hour to pack everything in a home that I lived for 6 years at that point. And I wasn't able to tell my kids, my 2 boys, goodbye. And I wasn't really able to communicate with them at all. And that's the first time I ran into family court, Meri. Before that, I had no experience with this system. And right away, I realized this is a very, very different set of rules in this court system.
Well, now this is pretty shocking as some of you are listening. Let's get into the background of this in regards to your son. Explain what happened to your son. And, you were concerned because some of his behavior he was exhibiting by playing certain video games.
Well, and maybe before we get into that, Meri, I felt called by the Lord while I was in DC in 2023 to start writing a brand new revelation about the book of Revelation and how we are living the best time to be alive. And it was a book that really started by exposing not only the deep state, but the deep church. And so my first book had 350 footnotes. It was called The Kingdom Age of the Saints. It's the end times for the New World Order. And so when I began to write, my wife at the time got more and more uncomfortable with the topic at hand. She worked for USAID, and she would criticize me and say, look, a lot of the charts and figures in your books are organizations that my friends and I work at. And I'm not very comfortable with you exposing what we're doing. And I said, I'm sorry, I feel called to do this. And so I ended up writing 2 more books And so she became increasingly more or less comfortable, if you will, with my work. And so I really think that this situation with the family court was retribution for that. And as we got into the court system, the evidence that was being brought against me had to do squarely with my faith. And so Tony and I
Well,
were
and
just,
just to back up a little bit, up to this point, I mean, you'd been a successful businessman. You had several companies that generated, a lot of revenue streams supporting, living this type of lifestyle in Washington, D.C.
oh yeah, our house was paid for. We had, a lot of money in the bank. And I told her, I said, if there was ever a time to start or to write, write some books and be in obedience to the Lord, it'd be now. I can't think of a better time to do this. And so, no, I started and sold several companies. We were completely debt free. We didn't owe a dime on our home. We had a lot of money in the bank. Everything, we had everything. And we had a beautiful. Our kids were in private school. I moved to DC so that really she could pursue her dream, which was to work, work inside as a political appointee. And so I saw a lot while I was there. I saw the January 6th marches and the prayer marches of 2020, and really my experience in DC shaped me in that it caused me to really seek the Lord and say, Lord, what are you doing right now? Because after that stolen election in 2020, really threw me for a tailspin. I thought all was lost in America. And that hunger and that desire for the truth is really what drove me into the Word of God and into writing this trilogy that I believe is a wave of refreshment for the body of Christ. In fact, I've had people write me. I had a J6er write me from prison and said, because of your book, your first book, he said, I was suicidal and I changed my mind. I believe there's hope for the future. I had another woman stay at my house, or I'm sorry, come over for brunch with her husband. And she said, I was suicidal, but when I read your books, I snapped out of it because it showed me there's hope for the future and there's a resurrection of the dead that we can look forward to. And so all this was going on. And, Meri, as you know, when you're over the target and you're going against the work of the enemy and exposing the deep state and the deep church, I'll add, you become a target. And what I found out is family court seems to be the favorite target of the deep state against people that are being effective in the work of the Lord. They went after Mel Gibson. They've gone after quite a few using the family court system. And so when I was thrown out of my house, I had been in court over and over and over for business. I'd employed hundreds of employees in one of my companies. I'd been in Delaware Chancery Court. I'd been in federal bankruptcy court. I'd been in all these different court systems. I'd never lost a case. And so when I got thrown into this situation with this unjust judge with a big pack of lies, false allegations, no evidence, no witnesses, I was ready to put the gloves on and fight. But I realized this is a very different battle than your traditional court setting. And so it began a journey that started in January of 2025 and has continued up till now, with the kind of the crescendo being last week. We were in DC in court for 3 days. And then, to fast forward a little bit, Tony and I are really fighting the system. We're suing the District of Columbia. We're suing this unjust judge, John McCabe Jr. We're suing the opposing attorney. And we're going after this group in DC in federal court. And so I think that's what it takes, is to fight back.
Wow, what a story. And we'll get into a little bit more of the details about the prayers too. But Tony, going over to you, I mean, the fact is that Benjamin had to literally leave his house within an hour, not even have any notification, a home that, he paid for in cash. And now he's not even able to say goodbye to his children. You would think that he would have rights, you being, the president of American Common Law Academy. What is happening in our country with the family courts?
Well, most people, it's in the family courts. It's the IRS acts like CPS too. These individuals do not have an oath of office like these judges do and these prosecutors. And so the due process clauses in the 5th and 14th Amendment give you those protections that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Benjamin has not been convicted of a crime. You know, and if you're supposed to be brought before a felony, technically, you're supposed to have a grand jury look at it to indict it. So they're arbitrarily charging people with crimes using the best interest of the child doctrine, in which we're challenging that in federal court. It's Rule 5.1. It's very vague and ambiguous, and you can't have an overbroad law that you can apply anything you want to. So what it is you're guilty until proven innocent instead of opposite, and you're allowed to face your accuser, and your accuser has to have an affidavit, and a grand jury has to look at it and say, is this indictable? And that's how the republic's supposed to work. But, you know, we're operating under this Article 1 administrative courts, and we have these administrative law judges who have oath of offices, and that's why we're suing the judge. So they're basically, in, you know, layman's term, not giving you the process due in this country to be innocent until proven guilty.
Well, and that's why it's time to stand up and fight, just like it said in that trailer. I mean, when I went in 2017 over to Thailand, and felt that I was supposed to do a documentary about trafficking, sex trafficking, and when I came back, which I really needed to see what I saw, because Thailand is the #1 sex tourist destination in the world. And so there's a lot of people from America and England and Europe and whatever that go to Thailand. It's not legal, but it's almost like the government looks the other way. And I got my eyes open to a number of things. But when I got back, God said to me, no, I don't want you to show what's happening in Thailand, even though you needed to know. I want you to show what's happening in America. And when I started interviewing people and heard about the CPS system and the foster care, and many of these kids are literally trafficked right through CPS. You know, I've been doing events. I have a movie now called Freedom Cry, Sex Trafficking in America, that actually we're going to be showing at the event in Las Vegas in the afternoon. Kathy O'Brien, who literally, you know, the whole MK Ultra under Operation Paperclip, there's been so many people through the system, you know, that have literally been trafficked through our own governmental system and the system of Child Protective Services, or CPS, which isn't even a governmental agency. So, Benjamin, going back to your story a little bit. So here, going back to when you were told to get out by the police, and you had an hour to do this. Basically, you know, your wife, as you said, you'd been writing some of these books under the directive of the Holy Spirit, and she felt uncomfortable. So whatever but really there was an issue where you started noticing some things with your son, and you wanted to pray for your son. Explain a little bit about that situation.
Well, yes, 2023. So this all happened in January of 2025. But back in the summer of 2023, my oldest son had gotten hooked on a video game called Roblox. And Roblox, for those that maybe aren't familiar with it, is a video game advertised for young, you know, boys and girls. It is being sued in 4 states because it's rampant with pedophiles and Satanists. In fact, I believe yesterday they nabbed one of the Roblox programmers for having extensive library of child porn on his laptop. And it is an absolutely demonic game. Well, you know, my boy met someone at school that was the parents were going through divorce. He asked him to play with him. He started playing and he got hooked. And he was hooked for about 6 months. During that 6 months, he was kicked out of school. He told his grandfather to F off, which was not his style at all. And his behavior got progressively worse. And it's sort of at the end of the summer of 2023, I literally went into his room and he was foaming at the mouth, screaming at the top of his lungs, "I am the Antichrist and God is a demon." And so, you know, when you hear those words from, you know, a 10-year-old boy, if you're like, you know, you, Meri, or you, Tony, or me, you know what to do. You know, this is a spiritual problem. It is not something that a drug will help. It's not something that, you necessarily would call 911 about. You go to, you go for help in the spiritual realm. And so the first thing I did was call a pastor in New York who was my son's godfather. He was not available. My second call was to a local priest, Father Larry, in the District of Columbia. And I said, Father Larry, I'm having some trouble with my son. I kind of put the phone out. I said, maybe you understand what that is. And I'll be right over. So he came over. We did a deliverance with my son. Fast forward about 30, 45 minutes later, he's sleeping. He's calmed down. He's much better. We went to town on that influence in his life and got him free. Well, little did I know that my wife was recording the deliverance session with Father Larry and I, and that would end up being her first exhibit in the case in the District of Columbia. And so, and it started way back when I had to defend myself in the civil protection order. My faith was brought in, my podcasts, my videos, my book, my prayers that, the prayer about deporting demons was put up in the evidence bucket. And imagine you're in the District of Columbia with probably an atheist judge, right? I'm pretty sure our current judge of the divorce is a lesbian, probably an atheist as well. I don't know that for a fact, but to them that does look crazy, right? It looks like, who is this, zealot, religious nut? Well, so anyway, that's what we've been fighting this whole time, is my religion and my faith has been on the stand. And so it was Tony. I said, Tony, how do you defend against, a secular court with a secular judge who's probably not even secular? He's probably an atheist. And, how do you defend yourself? And Tony had the great idea. He's like, well, get an expert witness in exorcisms. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I began to reach out to some people to help me. And sure enough, I found that Father Larry and his, at that time, his boss, Monsignor Pope, who's the exorcist for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., were willing to come to court and defend my honor, if you will, in the D.C. courthouse.
And that was, I heard about this, they didn't want to put him up on the stand, but why don't you explain what happened on that day in court when one of them got up? Which one got up there? Was it the Monsignor?
Well, they both had to bring both of them, because one was a fact witness and one was an expert. And so no, when Monsignor Pope was in the lobby, and he's like 3 levels below the Pope. Okay, he was he was appointed by some kind of archbishop, and he really is one of the good ones. I have so much respect for Monsignor Pope. I'm not Catholic, Meri, but I just really respect him so much, and I know there's many like him in the Catholic faith, and so I was really, really proud of him. But
well, and I'll just interject really quickly. Some of you might be listening. Well, I know in some of the Catholic, there's a lot of situations that have happened, but we've got some good ones like Archbishop Vigano, different ones that have stood up for these things and really do know some of the things to protect and really bring deliverance for children from the demonic realm. So we can't throw everything out. You know what I'm saying? I was raised Catholic too, even though I don't really practice Catholicism, but they believe in Jesus. Catholics love Jesus. And so anyway, continue on.
Yeah. So, and Monsignor Pope was one that stood against the COVID tyranny. And so he was written up, I believe, in the Washington Post, because he kept his church open during COVID. And he's like, I don't care what you say, we're going to have service. And, they vilified him and called him a killer and all that stuff. And so I kind of had an idea, that he might be one of us and a fighter. And so it turned out he was. But, when we got in there, Tony was there. My attorney for 20 minutes fought off the judge and the other side that did not want him to step foot in that courtroom. And so when he got in that courtroom, not only was that kind of a mini miracle, even though he'd already been approved. They waited until the trial to really fight it. He just began to talk about the importance of deliverance and the importance of deliverance ministry. He began to explain what happened in that video, how we brought relief to my son, and how Father Larry and I had done exactly what he would have done in the same situation. And he wasn't really prepared for this question, but they had challenged my belief in the resurrection of the dead extensively, asked several questions about it. And they said, well, Benjamin, you believe that aborted babies and miscarried babies will one day rise from the dead? And they made it out like it was absolutely asinine that somebody could believe that. I said, look, I didn't write that. Jesus Christ wrote that. That's in the Bible. I didn't write that, but I believe it because I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. And so they just really challenged that so much. And so now we had Monsignor Pope qualified as an expert witness. And so we thought, well, while he's up there, why don't we have him answer some questions about faith and belief? And so I'll never forget it. Jenna, my attorney, said, now, Monsignor Pope, what is the church's position on the resurrection of the dead?
She did not want to ask that question. You remember that?
Yes.
Like, ask the question. Ask the question.
And it was so hilarious because he wasn't expecting the question. And he kind of looked up like, he's like, we talk about that every Sunday. He goes, that's dogma. And he said it real loud, So then, the other side is like, well, what about this idea that, aborted babies and miscarried babies will get, risen from the dead? And he goes, every human spirit from conception forward will one day rise from the dead, and they're either going to go to heaven or hell. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. It was just such a God moment. And you know what it did? It caused a shift, because the shift was away from, you're this minority fringe, you call yourself a Christian, you're the minority, to, hey, you know what? A lot of people believe this stuff. A lot of people believe that Yeshua is the Son of God, and that we can stand strong in our faith. And, the topic of spanking came up extensively, the topic of belief in the resurrection of the dead. They tried to accuse me of being, a conspiracy theorist. And, while we're sitting there talking about tunnels under DC and child trafficking, the Epstein files are, coming out for all to see. And so it was really, it was really just an awesome opportunity to, talk about who I was, how I have raised my sons as believers. Yes, we do have spanking in my home. It's, by the way, corporal punishment is lawful in all 50 states. And so it really was an opportunity to.
Even the Bible talks about spare the rod, spoil the child. It's not like about beating them. Exactly. It's about, they understand, discipline. And God loves, he says, the Lord chastens those he loves. And when you said about Yeshua is actually the Hebrew name for Jesus. So people goes, who's Yeshua? Well, I was just in Israel. So, I know Yeshua is actually the Hebrew name for Jesus. So, Benjamin, as we just have about 10, 15 minutes left here, people that are watching here, I'm going to get over to Tony right now, and we'll go back to you, Benjamin. You hearing the story of a man who's upstanding citizen, you graduated from Stanford, you've been a successful businessman, now best-selling author, maybe has some different ideas than his wife, but you guys were married for how long, Benjamin?
20 years. I think I calculated we'd gone to 800 plus church services together, and we went to Joel Osteen's church in Houston, Texas, which is a full gospel church that, has classes on deliverance. We'd gone to a church in New York City. They would have monthly healing services. Dodie Osteen prayed for us to have our first son. After many failed attempts at getting pregnant. And so faith had always been a part of our life. And so it was really sort of laughable that all of a sudden this is an issue But I would say that, as I began to go through this process back in August of last year, the Lord said, I want you to really fight, because I was sort of in that place where, I can't change the system. I'm just going to do the best I can. And the Lord back in August and September said, I want you to fight. I want you to work with Tony, and I want you guys to play some really critical, you know, uh, I think the word the Lord used for me was Trojan horses into the system. I want you to, fire some missiles into the system and some important legal precedent and legal cases. And so that's when Tony and I started to talk, and we thought, how do we take the system down? And so Tony, it was Tony's idea that we start filing federal lawsuits. And so, Tony, what was that? That was about August of last year, right? September, when we started to really fight this.
Yes. And we haven't exhausted our lawsuits. We're attacking the financial aspects of the Title 4D funding. And this is the big cash cow for them, is they get matching funds. Whenever a child's separating from a parent, they immediately get on the docket of the federal funding. And what we're attacking is this funding cannot be used when it's violating constitutional rights, federal statutes. It's a thing called internal controls. They did the same thing during COVID. They received all this relief fund, and then they used that funding to attack people's, protected rights. And so there's QSIP numbers that are attached to these cases. So they're making bonds, performance bonds on these cases. So the longer the cases go on, the more the bonds perform. So it's human trafficking Part B under Trump's executive order against child sex trafficking and human trafficking. And so not only are our children being trafficked, our finances are also, and through these bonds.
Well, this is unbelievable, and it's all a pay-to-play scheme. I know Sheila Holmes, she will be at the event in Las Vegas. Tony, you will be there along with Benjamin. There's many of you that are listening that I know several people that have gone through similar circumstances where their child has been taken away. Anybody can call. Like, I know the whole situation up in Idaho, baby Cyrus, that
Right.
Ashley Stu Peters, they came out with a movie called These Little Ones. And, this family, the wife was sick, missed a wellness check for the baby, and the pediatrician called CPS. And, it was an unbelievable nightmare. And because of all the people rising up and standing up, and literally they got baby Cyrus back. But I mean, this can happen to anybody. And so we need to rise up because, as you said, there's bonds involved. And many of the times it's the best situation for these children to go back to be with their parents. But, oftentimes they put them in this foster care system. Many of these foster care, there's some good parents in the foster care system, but there's many that are not good, that these kids are being molested, they're being abused. They get money to have foster kids in their home. So a lot of people are doing it just to get the monetary money every month. So Benjamin, as we come to a close, your situation, so you had to move out, you were in a defensive position that it was kind of her word against your word. Like, so what did you do? I know you're fighting now, you're in court and everything else, but it must have been horrific as a father all of a sudden to be taking a nap and you get literally thrown out of your house in 1 hour time to literally have to get out. What did you do?
I flew to Texas, where I grew up, and started staying with family, and just started to. I knew this was going to be a very different kind of court case than anything I'd ever dealt with before. So I really started to reach out to a lot of different people and try to figure out how to win. And I was told right up front, if you're going to win this, you're going to have to be very, very. You can't go the traditional route. You can't just go, pay your $30,000 retainer, hire a divorce attorney, and go the traditional route. If you really want to make a difference, you're going to have to attack the system and create some precedent for change. And so we've already had some victories here. Meri, for instance, early on in the case, they ordered me to, well, not that early, but once the District of Columbia found out that Tony and I had sued the District of Columbia, within 6 hours, they ordered me to have a mental exam, okay, conducted by a DC employee. And so they wanted me to basically submit to a mental exam conducted by their people, full well knowing I had just sued the District of Columbia. So that's a huge conflict of interest. And so I think we ended up filing 6 different injunctions, motions, different things. And finally, at the end, I said, I was really praying about this, Meri, and I said, Lord, I really don't want to get a mental exam. I view this as a trap. And everybody I talked to said the same thing. It is a trap. Do not go do it. And I'll never forget what the Lord said back to me. He said, I don't blame you. He said, I didn't sit for the mental exam either. And I started thinking about Mark chapter 3, where, it says Jesus' sister and brothers and mothers were out there saying he's insane. And it says they tried to seize him and take custody of him. And he did not yield to that trap back then. And so I think what a lot of Christians do is say, well, everybody does it, so I just need to go do it. No, you fight back when it's appropriate. And so the Lord gave me permission to say no. And the last thing we filed was called a conscientious objection. And I said, I cannot, based on my belief system, be scrutinized by a non-believer in a court system when the topic of conversation is my faith. I'm not going to do it. I will not do it. And, they finally just gave up, right, Tony? I mean, they finally just said, okay, because they rejected everything else. And so that was a mini victory, if you will. And so I think what's going to happen out of this, Meri, is that we're developing success stories like that, frameworks and different things that we can then share with others how to beat the system. And I think we're going to have a lot more victories than just the one victory on the mental exam. We were on a show the other day, and Marianne told us that one of her friends went to jail for 6 years for refusing the mental exam. Well, I'm not in jail. I'm on your show. We're talking about it. So that's already a victory. Praise God. But no, without the Lord, I couldn't have done it. I mean, there were some very tough days, and, just had to pray for warrior strength every day. And I appreciated you and so many that came around me and prayed with me and encouraged me along the way. But it's a hard journey. And, for a lot of people, they're just by themselves during this time. And I would encourage everybody, get your prayer group together. And I think it was Tony who first said, you know what, if we're going to do this, we need to have people praying for us. And so we tried to have try to get together with our prayer group at least once every 2-3 weeks during this process. And we could have done it without prayer and without the strength of the Lord. And it's still going on. It's a test that's going to become a testimony. I haven't seen my oldest son in a year, so there's still work to do.
Well, let's put up that flyer one more time about the event coming up May 8th and 9th, the 8th Open the Heavens. You guys are both going to be there along with Sheila Holm, Scott McKay, Patriot Street Fighter 107 will be there. We've got Kathy O'Brien, Dr. Scott Young, Lewis Herms, who's actually been a big, person, the 2 tours around the country running for governor in California. But he has a film called Cages. The CPS system and the family court system is, there is some good judges. There's some good CPS people, good foster care, but there's a lot of them. They're making a lot of money, as Tony was saying, about these bonds. And it's a big, big system. And their system is going to come down, but it is a showdown. So really come on out. It's a free registration, but if you want to become part of the VIP, that you can kind of meet, special seating, you can actually meet the speakers. And then actually it's a beautiful 4-star buffet banquet lunch. It's going to be an incredible time. It's only $177. It helps pay, for the event. It's an expensive venue, Ahern Hotel, very beautiful boutique hotel, reasonably priced, no parking fees, no resort fees. It's right next to the Stratosphere by the convention center. So it's really well located in Vegas. So we hope to see you. Go to MeriCrowley.com and register for free, or get your VIP before April 15th. It's 10% off, $177. So Anyway, so in kind of wrapping up the show, Tony, let's take off that flyer. Tony, let's take, yeah, Tony. So as we wrap up, there's people watching, and I know this has happened. There's thousands of people in America that have literally dealt with the family courts, and literally, I mean, I know another lady that's dealing with something in Orange County. It was an accusation from the father, and it's almost like it was not even proved or tried. And here, Benjamin, you had to leave your home. This particular person now has to see their daughter under monitored visitations once a week. Unbelievable stories that I've heard, nightmares. What can people do, Tony?
Number one thing you want to have is you want to put your affidavit, your statement of facts on the record. A lot of times your attorney will not have that put on the record. So an unrebutted affidavit is considered facts on the record. And so a lot of times people's story is not getting recorded, because you could, if you lose a case and you get a bad judge, you can always appeal it, but you can only appeal what's on the record. And so you got to make sure, if you have an attorney, look, this has to be on the record. I want my side of the story on there, written under penalty or perjury. You know, this blows up this whole anonymous calls that, you know, I saw or heard somebody's children being abused. Unless there's an affidavit, you are allowed to face your accuser in a court of law. So a lot of these people haven't been convicted of a crime, and it's just under hearsay. So you put your facts on the record, create your paper trail, and definitely, you know, make sure your attorney's going to fight for you. You have to have that.
Now, and Tony, you're not an attorney, but you have the ACLA, the American Common Law Academy, because as we mentioned, a lot of these judges and attorneys are working together. And oftentimes these attorneys almost feel like they can't, you know, necessarily, especially in family court, fight the way they need to, because, you know, they're working with these judges every day.
Yeah, you have to understand the process. That's what I do. I educate people and equip them. So even if you are going to have an attorney, you at least be able to manage that attorney. And you have to educate yourself. It's like you don't wait for the storm before you put the roof of the house on. You have to be educated. Unfortunately, all roads lead to court anymore. This is a crazy culture we're living in with government overreach. You got to be equipped in this. Like, you have to be spiritually equipped. We need to know the 10 Bill of Rights. I try to simplify this. They violated Benjamin's First Amendment right, his religious exercise. They violated the 9th Amendment of the Constitution. You have a right to raise your children. So these are fundamental rights, and these courts and these lawyers make it so difficult that you're intimidated, thinking that you can't walk through the process. So that's what I endeavor to do, is equip and empower people to stand up and walk in that courtroom as one of we the people.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you, Tony, where can they reach you at?
Best way to reach me right now is just an email to me for ACLA@yahoo.com. And if you have people, a lot of times they want to send me 50 paragraph, you know, situations of what they're going through. Just send me your affidavit of facts, 15 paragraph from top to bottom, what's going on with you. And that would be best help me to educate you and consult with you on that matter.
Yes. Okay, great, Tony. Well, and so Benjamin, you know, as we, you know, close out today, there's people watching, you know, they're listening to you going like, wow, this sounds like a horror movie. It sounds like a nightmare, which it has been a nightmare. But what would you say to them, Benjamin, that are watching, like what they can do to take action? Because maybe it hasn't happened to them, but really all it takes is one call. Just like I talked about that baby Cyrus, the pediatrician called CPS when the mother missed a wellness check, but she called in and said she was ill. And, you know, she didn't do anything wrong. It was one call. So what would you say to the ones that are watching today, what they can do?
You know, look, when this first happened, I began to talk to a lot of people that have been through similar circumstances. And, you know, as things progress, and I learned how to fight this battle, as Tony mentioned, representing myself, I felt like, you know, I had a lot of experience prior to this in court as a witness, but most people are not in that position. And so what I suggested to Tony is that we raise some money to build up the American Common Law Academy, with staff and resources to be able to help more people. And right now, Tony's helping me. I'm his student, but I think American Common Law Academy, and he's helping some other people. But we need to scale that up to where people have a real resource that can help them. And we plan to score some victories and then take those into other cases. But we set up a Give Send Go campaign, Give Send Go / Save the Family. We're raising $1 million to scale up the American Common Law Academy, and also take care of some of the legal fees and some of the other things that we're dealing with. This is a very, very expensive undertaking. And so, but a little bit can go a long way when you're using tools like AI, whether it's Grok or ChatGPT or others. And so we want to train people how to self-service and go fight these battles and sue their judges, sue the court system, sue the municipality, put them, go on offense. And so I think what we want to do is raise some money and propel the American Common Law Academy to scale up and help a lot more people. And so, that's my hope here. At some point my case will be resolved, but there's going to be thousands, and there are thousands of other cases that we need to help people with. And not everybody has the courage to go sue their judge and sue their town. But if someone's behind you saying, go, 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 and helps you with the tools, then I bet you a lot of people will step up and fight back like we did.
Well, it's actually creating a precedent. And, that's why, this is kind of the first. I mean, Sheila Holm actually did it in San Diego. She went through an incredible battle. We're not going to get into that, but she's the one that actually connected you, Tony. She was at my Open the Heavens event, and you both were there. And that's where, like, at these events coming up, like in Vegas, it's going to be good if you can come and connect. That's what people do. They connect with a lot of people, and it's going to be actually an incredible time. Well, listen, thank you, Benjamin and Tony, for coming on. Thanks for watching. Now is the time. I know that this is an hour that we really need to step up to the plate and not back down. I mean, we are in a showdown. I was in Israel. I went there on the 22nd of February. I flew in, and I didn't realize there was going to be a war and there was going to be, missiles and bombs coming around me. But you know what? We weren't afraid. We had to stand up. We went to places to pray, and we did whatever God got to take. It was at Purim time. And that's the feast of, Purim, where Esther stood up and went to the king and had to stay. You know what? We've been brought to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so if we perish, we perish. I mean, we're willing to go all the way. We're not afraid. And we can't be afraid, because God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of a sound mind. So please share this far and wide with as many people as you can, because, you look at what they've done in the schools with the LGBT Q initiatives. I mean, a lot of people, they're trying to pass in the schools in California. They have some legislation that if your child is being, groomed, basically, they don't have to tell the parents. I mean, these unbelievable things that is happening with our children. You can't even really give your child an aspirin without a note, but yet you can have your child transitioned on hormone blockers and different things. It's an agenda, people, and we have to wake up. So God bless you guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Don't be a victim, be a history maker. That's our slogan for Save the Family campaign.
Yes, be a history maker. Anyway, God bless you guys. Please share this. Please follow, subscribe, and share this with 5 people. If each person shared this with 5 people, it could go viral. But they've shadow banned a lot of people. I mean, I didn't think they'd shadow ban you just for talking about helping children and fighting against trafficking and all that. But you have to understand, we're in a war against the demonic realm, and really the war is the children. It's all about the children. And so we have to save the children. So God bless you guys. Thanks for watching. Now is the time. It's time to take action. God bless. We'll see you soon. Hope to see you in Vegas.
Thank you, Meri.
Thank you.